I think I'm live now. Hi, everyone. Hope you're well. Hope you're staying home, staying well, but getting taken care of what you need to get taken care of. This is kind of a little bit of a writer's dream, maybe. Plenty of time to write and read. But unfortunately, there's a lot of other stuff to do. Got the kiddos at home, trying to make sure they get school done. Lots of other stuff. Well, it's 2:00, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining me for the Hope in Cripple Creek Facebook Live event. Again, I am Sarah R. Turnquist, coming to you from Middle Tennessee, and I am an author and speaker and multi-published clean historical romance author, to be more specific. I will be sharing my 4th published novel, Hope in Cripple Creek, and its novella sequel. So feel free to ask questions in the comment section, and we will do our best to answer those as we can. And stick around for details about the giveaway that goes along with this Facebook Live event. So we will move right along. And I'm sorry if you're joining the live late. I've been kind of vamping at the beginning of these events, so maybe I've trained people to come in a little bit late, but y'all can always back it up and watch it from the beginning. So here is Hope in Cripple Creek, and I'm trying to get better about which side of the... I'm not getting better. Here is Hope in Cripple Creek. And this cover was not designed by Core Graphics. This was designed by AM Design Studios. The first time I had worked with this graphic designer, she did a great job. She proved to be both talented and very easy to work with. So I really enjoyed that. On the cover, we have our heroine, Katherine Matthews, and the background is this old Western town front. This is set in Cripple Creek, Colorado. So that's kind of what the graphic artist was going for, kind of what I was hoping for. It takes place in the late 1800s. So that's kind of the feel that's happening here. And as usual, I want to point you out to the tagline here at the top. And it says, amidst devastation and loss, can one woman find love? So there's a lot of trouble brewing, and out of that, perhaps a budding romance. Do tell. Once again, we're going to do the bookstore maneuver and flip the book over and read the back cover copy. Here goes. Tragedy strikes Katherine Matthews in the small town of Cripple Creek, Colorado. An epidemic teams her with an old enemy, Wyatt Sullivan, the town's doctor. In the midst of desperation and death, Katherine has decisions to make, but she has no idea to what extent they will affect her daily life and livelihood. The town is turned upside down when the gold miners go on strike. The owners bring in outside reinforcements ready to break the resolve of the Western Federation of Miners. Everything in an upheaval, Katherine faces a crisis of faith and hard choices. Will life ever be normal again? So that is basically what you get of the book on Amazon, unless you get a little peek inside. And in the bookstore, as I've said, people generally will look at the cover, read the tagline. If they like the look of the cover, they'll look at the back cover copy, sometimes called the back blurb. And if they are intrigued enough by that, they will open it up and read maybe a first couple paragraphs or a few lines of the first chapter. And sometimes people will peek at the last few lines, see how it ends. I am not one of those people. I like to let the story unfold. I don't know, to each his own, I suppose. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the inspiration behind the book. Some of you are already aware of the way that I build a story. So I have the historical event or time period and the story of the romance, the love story, and I weave the two together in the novel. So the question has been, each of our Facebook Live sessions, which comes first? In this case, the spark, the seed, what writers call that basic idea that begins everything that comes after, has been, for this book, the love triangle. Now, in my previous books, the writing kind of lent itself to the creation of love triangles in pretty much each of the previous books. But those kind of appeared as I was writing the story. So in this book, I went about it more intentionally. I thought about maybe a woman that was torn between two men, one that she was very attracted to, but really had this kind of enemy beef from her past with, didn't care for him very much, and then one that she really, really liked, but didn't have the same heat with. So what's a girl to do, right? So now I needed the setting for the historical context and the historical context for that part of the story. I decided to set my story in Colorado. I was a huge fan of the Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman television series. So it was kind of my way of paying homage to that television series a little bit. And my husband had spent some time in Colorado, so we were just chatting, throwing around some. He's great to help me with plotting and bouncing ideas around with. I should probably say that first. He is a writer as well. And so as we're bouncing ideas around, I asked him, I said, I need the name of a town. I was going for a fictional town. But I don't think he realized that. So I asked him for the name of a town that sounded like it could be in Colorado. I think he missed a little bit of what I said. Probably shouldn't talk to him while he's doing something else. And so he said Cripple Creek. So whether he caught all that I said, whether he realized it or not, I'm still not really sure. But as some of you may know, Cripple Creek is a real town in Colorado. It has a really interesting history. So as soon as I realized that Cripple Creek was a real town, I had to do some research to decide, am I going to keep it set in Cripple Creek, or do I need to create a fictional town? So I did some research and I hit gold, quite literally. See, during the mid to late 1800s, there was a gold rush to Cripple Creek, Colorado, the last great gold rush to Colorado. And following was this pretty unique and somewhat historically notable miners' strike. Now, I know what you're thinking, especially my female readers. Yeah, miners' strike, juicy. I would be thinking the same thing too. And I did think that at first when I was reading it, but some of the actual happenings around this strike were truly fascinating. And the ideas started churning and breathing life into a character, which ended up to be Katherine's brother in the story, struggling with the different viewpoints around a strike, seemed really intriguing to me. as always, my intent is not to tell the reader which side is right necessarily, but to be as honest as I can be, as curious as I can be about helping my character deal with the emotions involved as he is working out his journey, interacting with other characters on different sides of these issues. Again, as the author, using this fictive world to pose questions and letting the story world and the situations that come up suggest possible answers, and really letting the reader come up with what they want to walk away with. But really settling in on, or honing in on, what the character is experiencing more than anything else. So I did decide on featuring this piece of history as my historical backdrop for Hope in Cripple Creek. And I am going to read a couple of scenes for the excerpt, but I'm going to get some tea because my mouth is getting dry. All right, here we go. It's 2 scenes that fall back to back. So dry. And it's chapter 3, which really means not a lot to you, but maybe it will when you get a chance to read the story. Katherine, I'll tell you a little bit about our character. She is a school teacher. She is from Cripple Creek. Her family is from Cripple Creek, Colorado. And so she was raised in the town, went away to get her education, or to finishing school, to finish her education as a teacher. And now she's come back to fill that position in their little town schoolhouse. Here we go. Nearly an hour after school dismissed, Katherine sat hard at work grading papers. She smiled at the answers to this most recent assignment. Yes, she was pleased with her students and their progress. Although a few gave her pause and a couple gave her trouble, it wasn't anything she couldn't handle. The most important thing was that they showed improvement under her tutelage. And they did. Her stack of work dwindled, and she curled her back in a stretch. The muscles protested, but relaxed into their natural position, now soothed. Movement just beyond the walls of the schoolhouse drew her attention. Who would be outside at this hour? One of the troublemakers up to no good? Or did one of the students return to collect something left behind? Katherine scanned the schoolroom as she stood and moved toward the window. Sweeping the lace curtain to the side afforded Katherine a complete view of the front of the schoolhouse. As she gazed out to the yard beyond, she spotted a carriage moving closer. Who? She squinted to focus her eyes and could just make out the features of the figure. Timothy! The rest of her work could wait. Smiling, she grabbed for her shawl. No doubt Timothy had something fun planned. Over the last several days, he had made every effort to plan special rendezvous and outings for the two of them, and so she found herself in eager anticipation of where he would pop up each day. Stepping out onto the porch, she met Timothy as he pulled up to the door. "Good day, Miss Matthews," he tipped his hat. He wasn't the most handsome man she had ever met, not that he was hard on the eyes, but he might well be the most gracious. "Good day, Reverend," she offered him her brightest smile. "I wondered if you would be agreeable to an afternoon ride with me," he said, indicating the seat next to him. "With you? Why, of course I would." A cool autumn breeze blew across the yard, and she wrapped her shawl tighter around herself. The rustle of leaves being picked up and scattered tickled her ears as she pulled the door of the schoolhouse closed. Timothy hopped out of the carriage and, walking around to the opposite side, offered his hand to help her up. Katherine slid her hand into his, grateful for his assistance. How good it was to be out with him again. A gentleman above all else, she felt comfortable and safe in his presence, but also cherished. Once she was in her seat, Timothy disappeared. The carriage jerked to the side a bit as he hoisted himself into his seat. He gripped the reins and urged the horses forward. As they got underway, a silence fell between them. Not one of those uncomfortable pauses. Katherine rather enjoyed it. With Timothy, the silence didn't seem so awkward. So she watched the familiar scenery and rested back against the gently rocking carriage seat, taking it all in, both her surroundings and his presence. After some time, Timothy broke the stillness between them. How are the students treating you? How to answer that? She didn't wish to disturb their afternoon with tales of the troublesome students, nor did she want to seem like a braggart and harp solely on her successes. I'd say fair to good. Only fair to good? So he wanted to hear more. Katherine sighed. I have a couple of students who pose discipline problems, but we're working things out, finding our way to a better understanding. That sounds promising. Timothy's voice was so confident and firm. Did he have that kind of faith in her? Her heart warmed, but he was her overseer. Shouldn't she reassure him? Even so, these students don't create serious issues day to day. I'm glad to hear that. His voice softened. Could that comment be more about his consideration for her than for the classroom being well run? Or was she mistaken? Perhaps he did think after her ability to handle the children. I do think, despite our small setbacks, that the students are all learning. Timothy nodded. If you need help with another science lesson on reptiles, just let me know. She smiled at that, but only briefly. The memories of their last field trip were not altogether pleasant. Unbidden, they unfolded in her mind. The small cavern, her difficult breathing, Timothy's concerned eyes. Hey, Timothy said, his voice gentle. Did he notice the change in her mood? I didn't mean to. She drew in a ragged breath, coming back to the present. It's all right, she lied, turning to look at him. He took a hand off the reins for a moment to clasp her small fingers in his. Smiling at his gesture, she squeezed his hand. He was a good friend. She hoped that wasn't all. They continued to ride like that for a few minutes until he needed his hand back to slow the horses. They neared the creek, one of her favorite spots. How did he know? Why are we stopping? Because I have a surprise for you. He reached behind the seat and pulled out a basket. A picnic, Katherine clapped. There were few things she enjoyed more than picnics. He jumped out of the carriage and came around. With his hands on her waist, he helped her down. Once on the ground, they were face to face. The moment seemed to draw out. She held her breath. Was he going to kiss her? Would she let him? But true to his nature, he was a perfect gentleman. After a handful of seconds, he removed his hands and offered her his arm, lifting the picnic basket with his other hand. Taking his arm, she allowed him to lead her to a spot near the creek that offered a nice view of the mountains in the distance. One of her favorite places as a child. It stole her breath anew. Timothy busied himself spreading out a blanket. He then brought the basket over. I hope you don't mind, he said as they settled down onto the blanket. But I took the liberty of asking your mother about some of your favorite dishes. She caught herself before her mouth dropped. Her heart did a little flip-flop. Mind? I'm impressed. My favorite dishes? My favorite picnic spot? Your favorite picnic spot? I brought you here because it's mine. Oh, I guess that's one more thing we have in common. She offered him another smile. Was it her imagination or did his face color just a bit as their eyes met? Now, I can't take credit for the food. I had some help from Miss Abby at the boarding house. What did that matter? Katherine's mouth watered at the pleasant smells coming from the basket, now in close proximity. I can't wait. He uncovered the basket and set out the food. Katherine watched him, thinking of how perfect this afternoon out truly was. I could get used to this. Katherine grit her teeth against the bumping of the carriage, no longer a gentle rocking. Pain tore through her at each rut they hit in the road. One glance at Timothy's stony face told her volumes. Reaching out a shaky hand toward his arm, she attempted to calm him. Timothy, I'm truly all right. We're almost there, he dismissed her. You'll be fine. He said this more to himself than to her, she suspected. Did he think he was responsible for her little spill down the creek bank? If only there was something she could say. Drawing the horses to a halt, he jumped out of the carriage and raced over to where she was. Reaching up, he positioned his hands first one way, then another, seeming unsure how to best get her out. This could take forever. Biting her cheek against the pain, she leaned toward him and all but fell into his arms. She couldn't help the yelp that escaped. The crestfallen look on Timothy's face was almost more than she could bear. She was stung anew, not by her injuries, but by her heart. They were at the clinic doors in a few of Timothy's long strides. He fiddled with the latch underneath her for a moment before the door gave way. As he stepped into the clinic, Wyatt rose from his desk. He laid eyes on them, and Wyatt leapt into action. Moving farther into the clinic, he indicated Timothy should lay Katherine on the examination table. He did so, placing her as if she was made of fine china. "Tell me what happened," Wyatt barked as his hands moved over Katherine. He checked her pupils and grasped at her wrist. This was certainly not necessary. Katherine opened her mouth to speak as she tried to wrest her hand away from Wyatt's, but Timothy spoke before she could utter a sound. "We were walking by the creek, and Katherine's foot found a hole in the ground. She slid down the bank and landed on her side." The distress in his eyes and in his voice would be evident to anyone. Another pang. Why did he feel so responsible? It was her clumsiness that caused this. Wyatt nodded, frowning. "What hurts?" He looked at Katherine. She tried to sit up. "There must be a way to put an end to this foolishness." "I'm fine. Timothy is just overly concerned." Wyatt pressed her back down onto the table. "That may be, but I insist you let me examine your injuries. What hurts?" Katherine bit at her lip. She did not want Wyatt examining her. Hatred and unforgiveness filled her. It was almost a tangible thing within her as she gazed into his steel blue eyes. No, she did not want his hands on her for any reason. She shifted her focus toward Timothy. Would he help her? No, none would be found there. One look at his guilty face told her she wasn't getting out of here without complying. She needed to endure this, for his sake. Closing her eyes for a moment, she took a deep breath and faced Wyatt again. His eyes were hard on hers. If she could have pulled back, she would have. But she gathered her wits and met his gaze. "It's my left ankle, where I stepped in the hole, and my right side where I landed." Wyatt stepped to the foot of the table, and his hands moved over the already swollen area. Katherine grimaced in pain. Did he have to be so rough? Timothy, still standing on the opposite side of the table near her head, reached for her hand. She appreciated what comfort he offered her. Wyatt prodded the injury, maneuvering the ankle at the joint, testing the integrity of the bones. "I don't think anything's broken, just sprained," he concluded. Katherine nodded, letting out a breath. Thankful his examination was over. She didn't think she could stand much more of his inspection. Wyatt moved back toward her head, but his eyes sought out Timothy. "I'm going to have to ask you to excuse us while I examine her ribs." Katherine's eyes shot to Timothy. He couldn't leave her. She would never have agreed to come if she had known there was a chance she would be alone with Wyatt for even a second. But now she felt stuck. What could she do that wouldn't upset Timothy further? Timothy looked at her, apparently not reading the trepidation in her eyes. He nodded his assent to Wyatt. But he did take a moment to lean over Katherine, running a hand over her hair. "I'll be right outside." She nodded, but that was of little comfort to her, as she would be left in here with Wyatt. Timothy lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to the back of her fingers. Katherine smiled at him, her heart sent into rapid pacing by his caress. He laid her hand back down by her side. She could do nothing but watch him step outside the clinic doors. And then she was alone with Wyatt. Her eyes narrowed as they landed on him. Wyatt followed Timothy and locked the door behind him, pulling the curtains closed as well. Then he turned back to Katherine. "I need you to disrobe down to your chemise," he said, walking toward his wash bin to clean his hands. Katherine's heart stopped. "Absolutely not!" Wyatt whirled back around, shock evident on his face. Perhaps he was not accustomed to outright refusals from his patients. "What?" "I have no intention of disrobing for you, Wyatt Sullivan," she said, as she struggled into a sitting position, leaning heavily on her left arm. "It's Dr. Sullivan, and I need to examine you to make sure there are no internal injuries or broken ribs," he said firmly. She glared at him, every part of her flushed with heat. "Well then, Dr. Sullivan, I shall thank you for your services and be on my way. I'm certain everything is just fine," she returned, her tone infused with determination. Katherine managed to sit, but if she wanted to get off the table on the side opposite where he was, she would need to lean on her right arm. When she did so, pain shot through her torso and she lost her balance and fell off the table. Wyatt was by her side in an instant, lifting her back onto the table. He swore, cursing her stubbornness. "You're just fine, are you?" he asked gruffly. She bit her lip against the pain. Anger toward him still burned within her, but she became aware that a tingling sensation coursed through her as well, and it was not altogether unpleasant. It could not be a reaction to his closeness. He had no right to treat her this way. That was the truth of it. Here, let me help you, he said. His tone did not invite comment or argument. His hands were on the top of her dress then. She was trapped. Her body needed treatment. So she lay without uttering another word as her face heated. How could she meet his eyes? Turning her head the opposite direction, she shut her eyes against the reality of what was happening. Wyatt opened the top of her dress down just past her waist and then moved away to wash his hands again. She prayed it would be over soon. When he returned, he did not make her take the top of her dress off. Rather, he slid his hands under the fabric to feel along her ribs. I'm sorry, but this will be uncomfortable, he said more gently than she would have expected. He was right. Pain shot through her upper body. Katherine shut her eyes, refusing to cry out in his presence. Wyatt was a gentleman. His expert hands moved over the part of her torso that required checking, yet did not wander into areas that need remain private. Still, it was disconcerting to have his hands on her body with naught but her chemise separating her flesh from the warmth of his hands. And there were sensations that arose in her unbidden, feelings she would rather not name or give credence to. Nothing is broken, he said after some moments, but you do have some bruised ribs. They'll be sore for several days, so I need to show you how to wrap them. She nodded. All of the fight in her had dissipated, and she was prepared to focus on what needed to be done to repair her injuries and be done with this whole ordeal. The next several minutes were spent with Wyatt showing her how to wrap her torso to support her ribs before he put a wrap on. Katherine then secured her dress before Timothy was admitted, and Wyatt wrapped her ankle. You need to use a walking stick for several days to take some of the stress off that ankle while it heals. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that you rest as much as possible. Wyatt walked over to his medicine cabinet and grabbed a glass jar of herbs, scooping some into a small container. Take this and brew it into a tea. It's the best thing I've found for pain relief. Come back when you're out. He handed her the container. You won't see me back here. No matter how much pain I'm in, I'd rather endure it than come to you for help. Between the confusing emotions and the impropriety of the situation, she could not imagine it. Thank you, Wyatt, Timothy said, offering his hand. I can't tell you how terrible I feel about all this. If I hadn't suggested we walk so close to the bank, I feel responsible. Then there was Timothy, sweet Timothy. How to help him know it was not his fault? Yes, Wyatt said, waving him off. Let's not have any outings for a couple of weeks at least. No more outings? Just who did Wyatt think he was to dictate Katherine's life? But she did not speak up. She had tired of this whole ordeal and did not wish to prolong it. Timothy nodded. Katherine turned her attention to Timothy, reaching for his arm to help her off the table. Wyatt's hands were on her back and arm, assisting Timothy in getting her down. It made her all the more eager to get out of his clinic, not because she despised his touch as much as she wanted that to be the case, but because it stirred something else in her. Now that she was off the table, she leaned on Timothy with her left arm protecting her right side. She leaned on Timothy with her left arm, protecting her right side. They began to make their way to the outside. Wyatt opened the door and they exited the clinic. As she stepped past Wyatt, she swore to herself this would be the last time she came to the clinic voluntarily. It was a long excerpt. So, excuse me. So, there is Hope in Cripple Creek. And after Cripple Creek comes Christmas in Cripple Creek. And that book is actually only available in ebook right now. So I don't have a paperback to show you, but I do have a print of the cover. It is right here, if I can show it to you without it gleaming. And unlike Hope in Cripple Creek, this has a background of a cabin and not the town. But you can see my graphic artist made the main character pregnant because she's pregnant in the story. All the wondrous things that the graphic artist can do. So I don't want to read the back cover copy again because it has spoilers for the first book. The second cover was designed by AM Design Studios again. But I will tell you that the second book follows the characters from the first book as well, just like the other my other sequels. And I am attempting to get a Christmas novella out at least every other year. I love Christmas time, and I think it's a time that people have extra time to read, and I think the novella length is really a good length for people to get a little taste of several different books during that time of the year. And now we have arrived at our giveaway. And for those of you that this is the first Facebook Live event of mine that you've been to, this is how the giveaway will work. I'm going to pose a question, and you can answer in the comment section. And if you are watching this Facebook event not live, we will accept answers in the comments up to 24 hours after the live event. So we will accept answers in the comments up until 2:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on April the 10th, right? Is that right? This is April the 9th. So Friday, April the 10th at 2:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Any comments made after that, you are welcome to make comments after that. You're welcome to make comments 5 years from now if you want, if Facebook is still here, which I have no reason to think it won't be. But we just won't be admitting those comments for the giveaway. The giveaway will be a paperback copy of Hope in Cripple Creek, an ebook copy of Christmas in Cripple Creek, and a $10 Amazon gift card. And the paperback will be coming from the Amazon warehouse, so unfortunately I won't be able to sign it. But just with the situation being what it is, we feel like that's the most appropriate thing. That's the safest thing. Yes, so that's what it'll be. The question today is, do you prefer covers where the character's face is cut off or not? So basically, do you prefer to see the character's entire face, or do you like covers where the character's face is kind of cut off, or where there's not a character on the cover? Do you like to leave it to your imagination? Do you like to see a little bit of character face? Just tell us what you think. I will go ahead and sign off here, but I hope to see you on Monday. We will be talking about, I'm looking at my wall. I have my covers on my wall here. We'll be talking about Leaving Waverly, a book that is set in my home state of Tennessee. So come join us on Monday at 2:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we'll be checking out that book. Bye.